There are currently 3 major war monuments on the National Mall in Washington, D.C., honoring veterans of World War II, the Korean War, and Vietnam. 2 members of Congress who fought in Iraq and Afghanistan have just introduced a bill to create a global war on terrorism memorial on the National Mall as well. What about a monument to wars that haven't happened, to peacemakers? What would that even look like? Who would we honor? Michael Knox has a bunch of ideas. He founded the U.S. Peace Memorial Foundation 15 years ago, and then he retired from his job as a professor in 2011 to devote all of his time to this effort. And he's written a new book about it called Ending U.S. Wars by Honoring Americans Who Work for Peace. Michael Knox is with me now. Welcome. Thanks for your time today.
Well, thank you, Julie, for having me.
So who is someone who would have their name on the National Peace Memorial Monument on the National Mall? What's a name that would be on there?
Well, there would actually be quotations from famous Americans who have spoken out against war, but it would also include a lot of living Americans who have won our U.S. Peace Prize. Organizations like Veterans for Peace, Code Pink, Women for Peace, Chelsea Manning, Medea Benjamin, Noam Chomsky, Representative Dennis Kucinich, Cindy Sheehan. We have hundreds of people that we recognize in the book and on our website, and will be recognized at the U.S. Peace Memorial. But there will also be quotes from famous Americans so that people who visit the U.S. Peace Memorial will understand that it is socially acceptable to speak out against a war. If there's a war that the United States engages in and you think it's not appropriate or it's immoral, you should feel comfortable. There'll be quotes from John F. Kennedy, things like war will exist until that distant day when the conscientious objector enjoys the same reputation and prestige that the warrior does today.
This is especially a memorial then, or a monument to people who oppose, to anti-war activists.
Yeah, anti-war activists, exactly. These are the people that we recognize in the book and on our website and will be recognized on the memorial. But then we have people who have engaged in cultural and leadership and historic positions in the United States who at some point in their career said some anti-war things that are strong. People like Margaret Mead, Ralph Waldo Emerson, Albert Einstein said, "I believe that the killing of human beings in a war is no better than common murder."
So could a U.S. president, I mean, you just mentioned John F. Kennedy Jr., but yeah. I mean, while he was in office, America was at war in Vietnam. And so could a U.S. president ever actually be recognized by the U.S. Peace Memorial Foundation?
No, not recognized the way we recognize anti-war people, but a quotation from Kennedy may have an impact on people who remember him and what he did and look up to him and see that he, at some point in his life, opposed war. It goes back to George Washington. There are people who have, and Eisenhower certainly.
Michael Knox, what's the point of a memorial like this? I mean, everybody opposes war. Peace is always the goal, but war is a necessary evil. Why do we need a monument to people who would rather not have war? Isn't that everybody?
No, it's certainly not everybody. Everyone would certainly raise their hand and say they support peace. But the key is that Americans, for one reason or another, are not as aware of what our country is doing in the way of war as they should be. The U.S. has bombed no less than 30 countries since the end of World War II. We've killed millions of people. We've maimed tens of millions more. That's 30 countries in 75 years. So we're disrupting education, healthcare, housing, businesses, infrastructure, the environment in these countries. And since 1946, no other country has killed and injured more people living outside of its borders. And I encourage your listeners to look into that. They can look at the book or look at our website, but we name every country that the U.S. has invaded since World War II. I think most people would say that they can't think of a good reason for that invasion, how these people were a threat to us, to our country, to our way of life. And yet that's what the government sells to us. When you think of all the wars, you think maybe it's time to honor those who oppose war.
I'm speaking with Michael Knox, who is founder of the U.S. Peace Memorial Foundation. They do an annual U.S. Peace Prize. And he's written a new book about the effort and also his hopes for an actual monument on the National Mall. The book is called Ending U.S. Wars by Honoring Americans Who Work for Peace. Mr. Knox, if a war memorial, and especially those that are on the National Mall, there are names of people who have sacrificed in the ultimate way in some cases, or, who've died, who are missing in action, who are seriously injured. What is the sacrifice involved in being against war?
Well, people who oppose war, many of the people who have received our U.S. Peace Prize or who are honored in the U.S. Peace Registry have been arrested multiple times, some hundreds of times. They've been gassed, pepper sprayed in the eyes, electroshocked, tasered, beat up by the police, imprisoned, home invasions where they're arrested in the middle of the night, the cost of attorney fees and bail, fines, loss of income, and certainly loss of friends. There was a period in my life where my parents wouldn't even speak to me because they were so upset by my opposition to the war in Vietnam. So you can lose a job, you can lose a promotion, certainly not the ultimate sacrifice. But if we move towards peace, then fewer Americans will die. And if fewer Americans die, there'll be less need for these kinds of monuments to honor their death. And that really is the ultimate goal, to make peace a priority, have a culture of peace rather than a culture of war.
What do you mean a culture of war?
Well, so many aspects of our country have to do with war, whether it's education or even think of President Biden, his inauguration address, his speech that he gave after his presidential victory, and his nomination acceptance speech for the Democratic Party. He ended all those speeches with reference to the military. May God protect our troops. And that was consistent with what Obama did, where he was always pointing out people in the audience who had uniforms or asking people to stand who were in the military and saying that they were the best this country had to offer, that they were true American heroes. And we want to change that a little bit so that the people who are working for peace are also recognized for what they have done and what they've sacrificed.
You envision a situation where anti-war activists who maybe picketed outside the White House in opposition to a war somewhere that we're involved in, that those individuals would be thanked for their service at public events, would be given, I don't know, priority boarding on airplanes like members of the military? I mean, do you?
Well, absolutely. But I think we have to go beyond that. Until COVID, we weren't even thanking healthcare workers. At public gatherings, no matter what you attend, a city council meeting, a religious service, an athletic event, basketball or football, whatever it is, a university event, they're always asking veterans to stand. They're always honoring the veterans. We should share that and, ask the teachers to stand, or the farmers to stand, or the healthcare providers, as we're doing a little bit more. But we're always tying it into the military, every aspect of our life. Even the military, the fighter jet flyovers that went across the country at great expense to honor the healthcare workers was trying to tie in healthcare. We're doing a terrible job of COVID, and we weren't treating it like a war. And yet they're trying to tie it into the military in some way. And that is those are just some examples of our culture.
Well, what's the effect of that? Help me understand why it's a bad thing to honor the men and women in uniform at the beginning of a football game, or to say God bless our troops at the end of a speech.
Well, I mean, this is militarism. The reason that we do that, let me just explain, is that during the Obama administration, the NFL leagues were paid money to have patriotic halftime ceremonies honoring the soldiers. The New England Patriots got $1 million in 1 year to do that. And this is a matter of public record. This started it. So once you do it in the NFL, colleges pick it up, high schools pick it up, and it's all part of reinforcing the militarism in the United States. So that people think it must be acceptable to go to war. But you think about the 30 countries, the millions of people that we've killed, and for every person we kill, there are 10 to 12 people who are severely injured that will have injuries for the rest of their life that will debilitate them in some way. And then you have, when people die in these countries, these millions of people that we've killed in Korea and Vietnam. Right now, we're bombing people in Afghanistan, Pakistan, Iraq, Somalia, Libya, Yemen, and Syria. We need to learn more about what the United States is doing and stop accepting this culture of war where militarism is so prevalent.
So, Michael Knox, are you saying that you think America should never come to the defense of an ally somewhere, or that we should not have retaliated for the 9/11 terror attacks, that it's never okay to wage war even to protect the weak or vulnerable or the democratically elected government of a country?
Well, that's a complex question. I think that if there were United Nations where the countries could come together and even override the Security Council and make a decision about which countries need this protection, that would be a good idea. But I don't think the United States should be protecting other people without the United Nations getting involved. But in terms of the 9/11 bombings, I mean, the 17 of the 19 perpetrators of that crime were from Saudi Arabia. And we didn't invade Saudi Arabia. It's Afghanistan, Pakistan, Iraq, Somalia, Libya, Yemen, and Syria. We have other reasons for invading those countries. I don't know what they are, but it certainly is not in retribution for 9/11. It's always some excuse like weapons of mass destruction. And we need to use critical thinking. American people need to look at these wars and decide for themselves, is this a reason for spending our money? And are there better ways to spend our money? All of our activities, education, housing, healthcare, everything that the government provides pales in comparison to what we spend on militarism.
Michael Knox, in order to get a monument to peacemakers on the National Mall in Washington, D.C., you'll need support from Congress. Have you ever managed to get any traction, any sponsor in Congress? What is the reaction when you ask for this?
Well, we're not asking for it yet. We are building the foundation. We plan to have 1,000 founding members representing all 50 states before we go public and make these requests. The Martin Luther King Memorial, which is a recent one, took over 25 years to build. It costs over $120 million to build. We have a ways to go, but our first benchmark is that we have people join the foundation and that we have 1,000 people representing all 50 states. And at that point, we will go forward and make these requests and raise funds. What we're trying to do is to reinforce those who engage in anti-war behavior so they'll continue to do it, hold them up as role models so that others will do it. And having a national monument will make it clear to the American people that it is socially acceptable to oppose one or more wars. This is not a monument for pacifists. If you felt that any of the wars we've engaged in are wrong, you should oppose it. And that opposition does not have to be anything too active. You could write a letter to the editor in your local newspaper. You could write to your member of Congress. And there's a broad spectrum of things that people have engaged in. We've identified in the book 900 specific anti-war activities that people have engaged in. And they go from that writing an editor to civil disobedience that often leads in arrest. But it's always nonviolent. And I think that's the key any kind of protest.
Michael Knox is author of Ending U.S. Wars by Honoring Americans Who Work for Peace. It's a new book that also includes the names of all the individuals who have been honored by a U.S. Peace Prize on the U.S. Peace Registry by this foundation, which Michael Knox founded. It's called the U.S. Peace Memorial Foundation. Mr. Knox, thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Julie. I hope people will go to our website, uspeacememorial.org, and learn more about it.
This is Top of Mind. I'm Julie Rose.